En este mundo de contradicciones, se expresa como la fundamental de nuestra época, la que existe entre los países sociales.
You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. These aren't Che Guevara's words, but they echo everything he lived for. Ernesto Che Guevara wasn't born a revolutionary. He was born on June 14, 1928, in Rosario, Argentina, to a middle-class family with books on Marxism on the shelves and stories of rebellion whispered over dinner. He played chess with his father, read poetry with his mother. He grew up surrounded by both tenderness and tension. As a child, he was tormented by asthma. Doctors warned he wouldn't survive long, that he should stay away from physical strain. But young Ernesto didn't believe in limits. He became a swimmer, a rugby player. Every gasp for breath only made him more defiant. He studied medicine, hoping to become a doctor. But he didn't find his purpose in textbooks. He found it on the road. At age 23, Che embarked on a motorcycle trip across South America with a friend. That journey changed everything. The vast Andes, the slums of Santiago, the workers' strikes in Chile, the misery of Peruvian lepers. These weren't just places. They were lessons. Brutal, unfiltered, unforgettable. He wrote in his diary, "I am not me anymore. At least, I am not the me I was." He saw one Latin America, wounded, divided, robbed. And he asked the question that would guide the rest of his life. Why should people be born to suffer, while others profit from their pain? Che's path turned sharply toward Marxism. He believed imperialism wasn't just about war, it was about economics, culture, even hope. He began to believe that capitalism was a system not of freedom, but of control, and that revolution wasn't optional, it was necessary. In 1955 in Mexico City, he met Fidel Castro. They spoke all night. By sunrise, Che had joined the Cuban Revolution. He didn't know the island, he barely knew the men, but he knew the cause, and that was enough. They landed in Cuba in December 1956 aboard the Granma. 82 men set foot on shore. Less than 20 survived the ambush. Che was one of them. In the mountains of Sierra Maestra, he earned his legend. He wasn't just a soldier, he was a commander, a teacher, a doctor, a judge. He operated on wounded rebels with one hand and wrote tactical plans with the other. He taught literacy to peasants between battles. Discipline was sacred. Betrayal was met with bullets. Che was both admired and feared. Even among comrades, he stood apart, intense, incorruptible. When Batista's regime collapsed in 1959, the world saw bearded men rolling into Havana in jeeps. But this wasn't just a change of government, it was a rupture in history. Che became a key figure in Cuba's new direction. He oversaw land reform. He redistributed wealth. He gave fiery speeches and penned philosophical essays. He became president of the National Bank, famously signing currency with just Che. To him, the revolution wasn't over. It was only beginning. But power didn't seduce him. He slept on cots. He refused luxuries. He worked in the sugar fields during harvest season. To Che, socialism wasn't a policy, it was a moral duty. And yet, contradictions followed him. He enforced harsh punishments on enemies and even comrades. He supported trials and executions. He spoke of love for the people, but sometimes acted with brutal resolve. This duality defined him. He was both healer and warrior, idealist and realist, gentle and severe. Che soon grew restless. The revolution in Cuba was stable, but Che was a man of motion. He wrote a farewell letter to Fidel Castro saying, "Other nations are calling for the aid of my modest efforts. I feel I have fulfilled my duty in Cuba." He vanished, first to the Congo, where a revolution crumbled. Then, unto Bolivia. There, he tried again. But the jungle was cruel, his asthma returned, supplies ran thin, locals turned cold, CIA agents closed in. On October 8, 1967, he was captured, his last battle lost. The next day, he was executed by a single shot to the chest. He was 39 years old. They tried to bury him anonymously, but they couldn't bury his story. Decades later, his remains were found and returned to Cuba, but he never really left. Not from memory, not from history. His image lives on walls, on flags, on t-shirts. Some wear it as a badge of rebellion, others call it hypocrisy, but few are indifferent. To many, Che is a saint of revolution, to others a dangerous fanatic. But whatever you believe, one thing is true. He lived what he preached. He walked away from comfort. He chose the path of resistance. He once said, "The life of a single human being is worth more than all the property of the richest man on earth." He believed in a world where no child starved while others feasted, where no man profited from another's silence, where dignity was not for sale. Even in death, Che Guevara keeps asking the same question. What are you doing with your freedom? He didn't claim perfection, he claimed purpose. He knew he might not win, but he fought anyway. Because sometimes a revolution isn't about victory, it's about refusing to surrender. Che Guevara was more than a revolutionary. He was an idea, a fire that ignited in the hearts of the oppressed across continents. Born into privilege but drawn to poverty, he could have lived a life of comfort and ease. Instead, he chose hardship, uncertainty, and sacrifice. The young medical student who once rode across Latin America on a motorcycle became the man who saw injustice not as someone else's burden, but as a call to action. In the jungles of Cuba, he wasn't just fighting soldiers, he was fighting centuries of exploitation, inequality, and silence. And when the Cuban Revolution succeeded, Che could have settled into a life of power and security. But he didn't. For Che, revolution was not a moment. It was a mission. He left Cuba not in search of glory, but in search of forgotten people who had no voice, no shield, and no future. In Africa, in Bolivia, in every corner of the world that echoed with suffering, Che brought with him not only weapons but books, not only commands, but compassion. He believed a true revolutionary was guided by a deep sense of love for the people, for dignity, for the dream of a better tomorrow. He was flawed, complex human. He made enemies and left behind controversy. But even his critics acknowledged the strength of his conviction, the sharpness of his mind, the raw courage of his heart. Che was not a saint, nor did he claim to be one. He was a man who chose to stand again and again where others fell back. His final days in Bolivia were not filled with glory, but with hunger, isolation, and betrayal. Yet even then, his spirit did not waver. He died believing in something greater than himself, and that belief has outlived his body, outlasted borders, and crossed generations. Today, Che Guevara is seen on posters, shirts, and murals around the world. But beyond the image is the legacy, a legacy that reminds us that ideas can't be killed, that courage is contagious, that the fight for justice is never quiet. Che once said, "The life of a single human being is worth 1,000,000 times more than all the property of the richest man on earth." In a world still struggling with inequality, these words echo louder than ever. To remember Che Guevara is not to glorify violence. It is to remember the fire of conviction, the pain of struggle, and the dignity of choosing principle over comfort. This video is not just a tribute to a man, it is a tribute to all those who resist, who dream, and who dare. But to truly understand Che Guevara, we must go beyond the icon and look into the contradictions that made him real. He was a doctor who took up arms, a poet who carried a rifle, a philosopher in fatigues. He was driven by an unshakable belief that humanity deserved more than submission to poverty, colonization, and despair. And that belief made him relentless. Che didn't just speak of sacrifice, he lived it. He slept beside his soldiers in the mud, shared their food, endured their sicknesses. He expected from others only what he demanded of himself, total commitment. His charisma was magnetic, but it was his discipline and vision that turned guerrilla fighters into revolutionaries and a ragtag army into a force that reshaped Cuba's destiny. He called capitalism the root of dehumanization and imperialism the great thief of sovereignty. Whether one agrees or disagrees with his ideology, Che's refusal to be passive in a world full of injustice remains deeply compelling. He saw complacency as betrayal, not just of others, but of the self. And so he kept moving, kept fighting, even when the odds were impossible. The man who once wrote, "Let me say, at the risk of seeming ridiculous, that the true revolutionary is guided by great feelings of love, embodied both compassion and conflict. That duality is what makes his story so compelling. He healed and he harmed. He inspired and he frightened, but never did he surrender to comfort or conformity. In the years after his death, governments tried to erase him. His face was removed from newspapers, his words silenced in classrooms. But something happened that no one could predict. Che Guevara became larger in death than in life. His face became a banner, his words a warning, his legacy a riddle. Young people across the globe, students, artists, rebels, thinkers, found in him not a perfect hero, but a symbol of defiance, of action, of possibility. In a time when slogans are sold and ideas are diluted, Che remains uncommercial in essence. He was not selling hope, he was demanding it. Not dreaming of change, but building it, bullet by bullet, word by word, step by step. His revolution was not just political, it was personal. It asked each person to look inside and ask, what do you stand for? What will you risk for it? Today, as we witness new struggles, new walls, new wounds, Che's life asks us uncomfortable questions. What does it mean to fight for justice? Can we balance force with morality? How far would we go for the freedom of others? Che Guevara never claimed to have all the answers. But he never stopped asking the questions that matter. In that way, his life is not just a story, it's a mirror. And perhaps that's why he endures. The past is not forgotten. It lives again through these stories, these images, and these voices. Thank you for joining us in History Gets Alive. Until next time, keep remembering, keep reflecting, and don't forget to subscribe our channel.